All right, we are here with Sam McClellan, who is an integrative acupressurist. And would you like to tell us a little bit about your training and your licenses, certifications, and sort of how you got into this field?
Sure. One thing is I don't have any licenses. When I was studying, there were no licenses. Now, you can actually have a massage therapy license or different types of bodyworker licenses, but it's not required in the state of Massachusetts. There are very few states that require it. I have certifications in a bunch of different things, but when I started, which was back in 1978, there was almost nothing going on with alternative health. It was all just sort of piecemeal. And so there wasn't even, like, the training program that I took back then was like 70 hours or something. It was very minimal. And the books that were available also were very minimal. So for me, a lot of what the early days were about were trying to find information. And I did get certificates for like iridology, reflexology, acupressure, herbology, craniosacral therapy later on, things like that, but nothing legal. Yeah.
Okay. And so, what does holistic health mean to you? How would you define it?
One of the first things I usually say is that there's the fundamental difference between alternative health and Western medicine, allopathic medicine, is that in allopathic medicine, you're looking at how, okay, this is normal and you're not normal. And how are you not normal? How can we diagnose it? And how can we fix that, cure that? In alternative medicine, it's more like an endless spectrum. You can say, well, you're here. Are you healthy enough for you? How do you feel? Do you want to feel healthier? Pretty much everybody wants to feel healthier. So there's always something you can do towards that end, other than, certainly there's some diseases that are very difficult to deal with, certain conditions. If you lose a limb, something like that, it's going to be hard to regenerate that, at least with our present understanding. But generally, looking at it in terms of where are you and where would you like to go, instead of, I call it the A to F view of health, which is like, well, you're A, you're okay, and F, you're failing, probably going to die, and at C, you're okay, but not great, sort of thing. The joke I like to tell, which isn't that funny but illustrates the point, is this, you picture a cartoon where these two people, there's a doctor and a patient sitting at their desk, at the doctor's desk, and all around them is nuclear wasteland. And the doctor's saying, well, no, Mr. Smith, you're perfectly normal. Everybody comes in here with hair loss and bone deformations and tumors. Now, it's like Western medicine sees everybody compared to normal.
Right.
They don't see people in terms of optimal.
Right.
So our job as practitioners is to figure out how to help people optimize. And it's a little bit like a hot air balloon. There's ballast and there's lift. The lift stuff is like eating well, exercising, working with meditation, your state, that sort of thing. And the ballast is anything that causes stress on the system, whether it's emotional, physical, something like that. And also how well you get rid of that stress is, you can either see that as getting rid of ballast or increasing lift. But that's the sort of thing. It's like, if you're floating along here and you come to a hill, you're going to bump into it. If you get your health up a little higher, then you won't, that sort of thing. So seeing health without judgment, without a value judgment, rather than seeing it as, something that's either better or worse. So. Okay. There's a lot more to that question, but that's kind of the basics.
Going off what you said about stress, do you feel that in our society, has this very constant, ongoing, everyone's on the go all the time, there's hardly any time for rest? Do you feel that you get a lot of patients coming in with ailments or disorders, issues related to stress?
Yeah, I think in the broadest scope, everyone is dealing with stress in one way or another. It can be present-day stress or stress from when they were a little kid that never got resolved, something like that. So I see stress as, you can either see it as information or energy coming into the body, that coming into the system then has to deal with. Like, you watch a little baby, if you're playing with a baby and you get them all riled up, it's positive, but it's still stress. And after a while, they're like, ah, and they cry for a little while, and then they either sleep or they're better. So that's how they dump stress. We in this culture, we're trained in all these ways how not to dump stress, how not to get rid of stress. And one of the classic ones is, I should be doing better at this. I shouldn't have this stress. I shouldn't feel stressed out. There are all these people around me who are doing the same thing and they're not stressed out. So I should pretend that I'm not stressed. And so there's never an opportunity to release it, to let it go. A neighbor of mine he's a physical therapist. He was at a huge conference, like hundreds of medical people, where they're having dinner while listening to this speaker, and he's choking. He starts to choke. And so he very calmly gets up, walks out of this room with several hundred people who could have done the Heimlich on him, and goes and finds a hotel worker and makes the choking sign. And the hotel worker's like, what's the matter? Oh, you're choking. Follow me, and tries to get him to follow him down 2 flights of stairs to the infirmary. And he wasn't going to make it. And he ended up having to Heimlich himself on a railing. That's shame.
Yeah.
That is one of the greatest reasons why there's so much stress now, is because people think that they're not right, that there's something wrong with them, that everybody else is doing okay except for them. And so that it can't help but generate stress and then not let us let go of it.
Right.
So stress, the anxiety from my standpoint is the way that we get rid of stress. Anxiety has this really bad name, but in fact it is the system's attempt to get rid of stress. So what happens, we start feeling anxious if we're a baby or we're a dog. The baby cries, the dog barks. We grown-ups, we go, well, I'm feeling anxiety. There must be a reason for this. It's because of that. If I could put a wire in your brain that set off anxiety, you would look around for, why am I anxious? And you'd find something. It could be, politicians or the fact that your toothpaste tube has a leak in it or whatever, but you'll find something. There's always a reason. So being able to figure out when you're having anxiety, being able to watch yourself and stay aware rather than going into this reactive state, fight, flight, or freeze, and just feel the feelings. It's really, really simple. So that's kind of my pet project right now. So.
And how do you think integrative acupressure relates to helping people deal with stress? How does that?
I think I would have a different answer for that 10 years ago, and the answer back then would be stress manifests in the body. There's a Candace Pert, the woman who discovered that there are neurotransmitters in the gut, that there's a gut brain, this neurobiologist. She has a tape that she calls Your Unconscious is Your Body, or Your Body is Your Unconscious. That one of the ways that we can access the unconscious, in fact, I would say probably the best way in a lot of ways, is by getting to know our bodies. That our bodies are telling us stuff all the time. So working with people on that physical level of being able to say, okay, there's tension here, and allowing the body to bring the tension up, manifest it, let it go. Even just the fact that you have an hour where you're lying on the table, not doing anything else, and somebody's caring for you and helping you to find places of tension and wake them up. But that process of letting go of tension, I think, is one way we get rid of stress. And the more recent answer I would add on to that, helping people understand what I was just talking about, that anxiety is not something to be afraid of or to push away. It's actually something that's a gift. It's the way that we heal from stress. So,
Thanks.
yeah.
And now you talked a little bit about the sort of how alternative medicine compares with
Allopathic.
Or conventional medicine. Do you feel that there is an interface between the two, or do you feel like they are separated entirely?
Yeah, it's a little bit like East versus West.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's over time, more and more there's an understanding between the two. I think on the alternative side, there's certainly been a lot of degradation of the Western medical approach. On the Western medical side, certainly a lot of that. You know.
Yes.
And I think as Western medicine matures, and I think a lot of alternative practitioners mature, we in this culture are maturing in our view of health, that we're starting to see a lot more common ground. That it is two different perspectives, but it's like the blind man and the elephant. They're both equally relevant. And a lot of the reasons that Western medicine is so good at what it does is because it takes this very analytic approach, but that's also the thing that creates its blind spots. Mm-hmm. And the alternative medicine side, a really good example of when it doesn't work is with Chinese medicine. There was this prohibition against doing any kind of autopsy, any kind of analysis of dead bodies. So everything that they learned about bodies, they had to learn by touching themselves and finding things that were going on, and maybe battlefield injuries or things like that. So their view of anatomy and physiology was pretty basic, very silly compared to ours. And yet at the same time, because they were blind in that way, they learned a lot more through other ways. Through it's been at least 1,500 years. Some would say a lot more of trial and error. Of this works, that doesn't, and of developing a picture. So that's one piece, and you can sort of break it down to left and right brain. The right brain is more intuitive, more looks at the whole picture, understands things in relationships. The left brain is more linear, point-oriented, understands things as this is what's going on here. This is what's in this essentially, or something like that. And Western medicine, because of its nature, because of the fact that they rely so much on analytic ways of diagnosing, machines and instruments, there's very little credibility given to intuition. In the earlier days of allopathic medicine, there was this real skill of palpation. Nowadays, there are some people who do really good palpation in Western medicine, but most of them, no. They look to some kind of instrument to give them objective results. So they're really, because of that, screening out a huge possibility for getting information. Both what's called anecdotal evidence, and also intuition. Intuition meaning information that comes to us in ways that we can't necessarily quantify. So is the answer to that question, I definitely see a lot of progress. There's a lot more acceptance of alternative amongst mainstream practitioners, and there's a lot more acceptance of allopathic medicine amongst alternative practitioners. And I think the best practitioners are not the ones who try to do it all, but who have an understanding of what different things offer, what different people offer, and how they can refer properly or integrate people into a system or whatever. I've had a bunch of experiences going into hospitals to work with people where the medical people were not just accepting, but supportive of alternative approaches. And that's very different than it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I had to sort of hide that I was there to help with somebody. Nowadays, I'm very respectful, but at the same time, I can usually find a place to work with people. So.
And you sort of touched on this already, but have you noticed a shift in people's acceptance of alternative medicine?
Yeah.
But also not just in terms of like practitioners, but maybe clients or just people that you may talk to about what you do on the street.
Yeah, definitely. It's pretty funny. In the old days, you kind of had to, have your elevator pitch. I do acupressure, which is, it's kind of like acupuncture, but we don't use fingers, and we use fingers instead of needles, and we do really good things with this and that and the other thing, And nowadays it's like, I do acupressure, and people are like, oh, like shiatsu, and then you say, well, it's a little bit different. It's more like acupuncture or whatever, that sort of thing. So there's that piece, and just people are much more educated now in terms of health. Even in places where health is not, alternative medicine hasn't really gotten in there, they still know what vitamin E is and vitamin C, and they know that there are people out there who poke people with needles, that sort of thing. So I think it's a hugely different scenario now. I think there's a lot less of educating that we need to do, and more around, in advertising, they say there's features and benefits. And a lot of people, when they go into advertising stuff, they think in terms of, well, how am I going to lay out all of our features? I can do this, I can do that. And really what people want is benefits. They want to know, well, what can this do for me? So our task, is to figure out what somebody wants, and then to offer what I can in terms of things that help with that. And sort of the interesting piece of that is, when I was teaching, I used to say that there's that, the customer is always right. Well, I had a saying, which is, the client is never right, which is a sort of shock value way of saying, you need to look beyond what they're saying and look for what's really going on, what they're really saying. For example, if somebody says, I can't sleep well, obviously there's going to be reasons for that, but it might be that there's emotional reasons. So being able to create an environment where people are able to explore with you what's going on for them, what's really going on, makes a huge difference.
And next, I want to talk about this whole idea of qi. I find it very fascinating. But I also want to know if you think that your patients have the ability to become more in tune with their qi and their balance of energy, and if they have the ability to recognize, when maybe they're falling out of balance, or what they can do on their own to get back into balance.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. The trouble is, if people start learning to do that, then I'll go out of business, right? It really is, I think, the job of any health practitioner to help support people in creating their own health. Certainly that is an alternative perspective. That is the most important thing we do, is to not just help people get well, but to empower them, to help them get to the place where they can recognize issues and change them. So, and one of the big obstacles to that, like I said, is this whole mindset of Western medicine, which is, there's a problem in there. You might have cancer right now, and we can only find out if we use these instruments and send a radioactive dye into you and take little pieces of your body and things like that. And it gives you this impression that the body is like a black box. And in fact, I call it the transparent body. The body is constantly dumping information out. It's constantly, the way that you hold yourself, the way that you feel, the feelings that are coming up for you. There's all these diagnostic techniques like facial diagnosis, pulse diagnosis, palpation, color of skin, the way somebody speaks. There are all these different ways that the body is literally broadcasting information to you, and it's really up to us both to be able to know what that is, to understand the language, and everybody's language is a little different, but then to teach the person that language. So, and to empower them that they can actually learn the language. The thing that I see so often with people is that they'll come in and they'll say something like, I've tried a million different things and nothing works, right? And then I say, well, okay, so that must be frustrating, right? And they're, oh yeah, it's really frustrating. I just don't think it's something I can do anything about. I need help. And then to lead them through, okay, there's that Far Side cartoon where there's this boy who's trying to open the door to the Midvale School for the Gifted, and he's got his backpack and he's pushing really hard on the door right below where the sign says pull. It's like effort is not equivalent to success. Effort in the right direction can be, but effort expended over a period of time that doesn't produce return means you're pointing in the wrong direction. So being able to say to people, well, here's the thing, you've been trying to make this go away, and it's been trying to tell you something. The reason that you have a knee problem is because your pelvis is out. The reason that you have depression is because you have trauma, that sort of thing. And you can take all the pills you want. It doesn't make the trauma go away. It doesn't make whatever that condition is go away. So being able to say to people, instead of trying to yell at your body or being feeling betrayed by your body because it won't fix, to say, okay, there's something here. There's something for me to learn here that I haven't picked up on. So. You can tell I'm very passionate about this.
Yeah, I like it. I touched on that already. So, where do you think healthcare is headed?
Oh, you know what? I never answered the qi question.
Oh.
In Chinese medicine, qi means energy, which everybody knows, but it's really about, you can really think of it as the energy that's being used for a task. And a lot of people think of it as this sort of mystical, it's not really electromagnetic, or maybe it is, but we don't know, or something like that. And it's more like Chinese medicine, one of the things about it is that they don't think that the model is the reality. In the West, we're like looking for the reality, and we create these models, which are simplifications of what's actually going on. And then we think that the model is the reality. We think that the telephone, the brain is like a switchboard. Well, no, the brain is like a computer. Something like that. It's like, no, obviously the brain, it's like trying to hold the ocean in a teacup. A computer does a little bit of what the brain does because we took the ideas that we found for the brain and we applied it to a computer.
Right.
So in the same way, we try to in Western medicine and Western science, we try to find the truth. And in Chinese Oriental philosophy, of medicine anyway, and I would say philosophy in general, they're not trying to find the truth. They're trying to find models that model what's going on. So yin and yang, qi, 5 elements, 8 principles. No, any reasonable Chinese medical practitioner will not tell you that there are, fluids in the body that have energetic properties. They will say, the way that we look at the body is these different substances. It's one way of being able to distill down what's actually going on inside the body. So, and it's the same with qi. Qi is work, same as in Western science. And it depends on what work is being done as to what they call that qi. Like there's the zhang qi, which is the qi of the chest, Somebody's got a lot of zhang qi, they sound like this, and if they don't have a lot of zhang qi, they sound like this, So it's just another way of saying, well, there's energy there that there isn't, So being able to understand, well, when you look at qi, when you look at functions in the body, there's really two directions it can be going. It can either be going towards building up infrastructure, creating matter, or it can be going towards action, towards function, And if there's an imbalance between those, there you can look at it in the overall picture, which is really what the 8 principles is about. Is it hot or cold? Is it external or internal? That sort of thing. Or you can, you can look at it from that standpoint of saying, where is the energy and where is it going? And that's where the imbalance is. If there's too much going into one place or too much going out. And so anxiety causes us to put a lot of energy out. And so then we don't have enough energy in. The body gets more and more out on a limb. And finally you get a cold, or you get pneumonia, or you get cancer. So, okay, sorry.
No, I'm glad that you remembered that.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting. Before I get to the next question, I just wanted, you mentioned that you've done some work with iridology.
Mm-hmm.
I recently read a little bit about it, and it really interested me.
It's pretty wild.
And I know there isn't really there are charts, I think, that can, tell you a little bit about what parts of the iris correspond to what parts of the body, but there isn't a ton of science. Is there very much science behind it, or?
I don't think anybody could say the reason these things show up in the eye is because of whatever. The one way of looking at the body is that it's basically a hologram. That there's in the same way that with a hologram piece of film, you have this little flat piece of film, and if you project a laser through it in different mirrors, it'll make this thing appear. If you cut that into small pieces and send the laser through a little tiny piece, the thing is still there, but it's fuzzy. So in that same way, there are all these different places in the body. You can think of it like where energy moves in and out, that end up being these little holograms, these little analogs of what's going on in the system. And so the tongue, the feet, the pulse, and the eye is the same way. So hopefully at some point we'll have a better understanding of why that is. But yeah, iridology. It's there's 2 different types. There's the European, which is, as far as I know, not really being developed anymore, but was a lot more complex. And then there's the American, which was developed by Bernard Jensen, who I studied with in the basement of a giant hotel in San Francisco, and I went through an earthquake with him.
Wow.
It was pretty interesting. And he basically took the European model, simplified it, and made it a lot more usable. So that's the one I use, and I really like it. I don't actually use it that much anymore because I can get information in a lot of other ways, but sometimes it comes in very handy. So one of the things about iridology was there's these things called nerve rings, which when you look at the iris, they're like tree rings, and they're like little ripples going all the way around the eye. And in the early days of iridology, they would occasionally see one in somebody's eyes, and they were like, oh, this person's stressed out. Well, now you typically see 3 or 4 nerve rings. So either nerve rings have gotten more visible, but more likely we're under a lot more stress now than people were in the 1800s.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I've never heard anybody explain it in that way, and I actually didn't read about that in what I did read about it. Iridology. I guess to sum it up, where do you think healthcare is headed, and do you think that alternative and conventional medicine will continue to be sort of these separate modalities, or do you think that they'll eventually come together and start working together?
There are definitely people who are combining them. I think definitely they'll converge. Western medicine, I like to say that Western medicine is in its adolescence. It's like it went through its early years where they would inject people or make people drink mercury, and they would bleed the feet, and they would, burn people, and all these terrible things. And then later on, irradiating thymuses and cutting out organs and things like that. And as it reaches more its adolescence, it is like, an adolescent, powerful, brilliant in many ways, and totally full of themselves, and totally think that they have all the answers and nobody else understands anything. And, it's getting to the place now where it's sort of hitting its 20s, where there are a lot more people who are saying, we don't have all the answers. We look at the medicines that we have, and 60% of all medicines, at least like 10 years ago or something, were based on something natural. And so they're actually going out and looking at, the Amazon rainforest and finding medicines there and that sort of thing. At the same time, they're doing genetic engineering on the other end of creating their own. So I think Western medicine is getting to the place where it's more emotionally mature. It's startlingly, amazingly powerful in the ways that it is. It's amazingly blind in the ways that it isn't. The idea that somebody who's very sick, you put them in a place where there are a lot of other sick people in a very emotionally charged, unfriendly place. You wake them up every 2 hours by sticking needles in them. You make it so that the food is terrible, the air quality is terrible. It's like this is not rocket science. Just because doctors need information every 2 hours, there should be some temperance with that. There should be some acknowledgement of, well, that's not so great. We need to find a better way. And so little things like having blankets in the waiting room in the office, the ER, warm blankets, something like that. There's like all these different ways that Western medicine is getting much more human. So I think there's been huge progress. I think there's still a bunch of ways to go, but I think it's been amazing what's happened in the last, my last 30 years. So I have high hopes for it, and I'm really looking forward to it. And on the alternative medicine side, I think alternative medicine is more and more embracing Western medicine modalities. Some of the best alternative practitioners right now interface with Western medicine. For me, it's like if somebody has a certain set of conditions, I'm like, go to your doctor, get this test, that sort of thing. And it's like, it's very helpful. So yeah, I'm not sure how much they'll converge and how soon, but I definitely see a convergence happening. So.
Well, thank you.
You're very welcome. This was fun.
It was fun.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. And again, this is Sam McClellan. And yes, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.